If there's anyone who is the patron saint of Asian martial arts, it's gotta be Bodhidharma. Whether or not you have his image on the wall, or you might have a Daruma on the shelf monitoring your goals, or even a solar-powered one who shakes his head at you. The influence of the Bodhidharma legend is far more widespread than most people realize. Not only is a picture of this handsome fellow displayed in many martial arts schools around the world, but his story has shaped the ethos of nearly all martial arts that trace their lineage back to China, and others as well. Even among those who don't practice martial arts, but grew up watching Shaw Brothers kung fu movies, there is a martial arts mystique and magic that we can trace back to the legendary Bodhidharma. So, who was this blue-eyed monk who came to China and transformed Chinese, Japanese, and Korean cultures? Bodhidharma was the 28th patriarch in the lineage of Zen Buddhism, who traveled to China in the late 5th century CE. According to most accounts, he arrived in China from India with the living message of Buddha, rather than the dead faith of books and letters that had captured too much of Buddhism. Upon coming to China, Bodhidharma first visited Emperor Wu of Liang, but that interview didn't go so well, when he dismissed the emperor's benevolence toward Buddhism as meaningless. So instead, he sailed across the Yangtze River on a single reed and settled in a cave outside the Shaolin Monastery. Yes, that Shaolin Monastery, known as the birthplace of Kung Fu, and its beating heart still today. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Bodhidharma settled in a cave outside the monastery, practicing his intense form of meditation for 9 years. His meditative discipline allowed him to cultivate mindfulness to the point that he could hear ants scream. I have no idea why ants scream, but that's the story. When he grew sleepy, he cut off his eyelids to stay awake. And it was from these eyelids, cast on the cave floor, that China's first tea plants grew. Ever since, tea has been an important aid in the practice of meditation, helping monks and others to lock in, as the kids say. While sitting there, his gaze was so intense that he bored holes in the stone wall. It's also said that he sat for so long that his legs withered and fell off. Now, this last legend does compete with the one that concerns us here, where he gets up and sets about developing an exercise program. When monks from nearby Shaolin came to him, wanting to learn his meditative practice, he sent them away. He told them, "You can't handle the rigors of my demanding meditative practice." But they kept coming. Eventually, he relented and wrote 2 exercise manuals so they could get in shape before undertaking his meditative discipline. And these were the Sinews Transformation Classic, the Yi Jin Jing, and the Marrow Cleansing Classic, Shi Sui Jing. These exercises, as the story goes, would form the basis for the subsequent martial art of Kung Fu. More specifically, Shaolin Gun Fa, which is staff fighting, and Quan Fa, unarmed combat. Thus, we have the story of how Bodhidharma became the father of Kung Fu. In reality, the Sinews Transformation Classic, the more influential of the two, was written about 1,000 years after the life of Bodhidharma. The Marrow Cleansing Classic was also written centuries after his time in China. Nevertheless, let us return to the legend of Bodhidharma and how he lived to the ripe old age of 150. According to some eyewitnesses, sometime after his funeral, he was seen again walking back to India with one sandal. When his coffin was unearthed, it was found to be empty, except for the other sandal. Now, for you cinephiles, the fantastic stories of his long life, or immortality, actually derive from the influence of Daoism on the Bodhidharma story, rather than Buddhist hagiography. The Daoists were the ones who believed that men and women of great spiritual and physical discipline could achieve tremendous longevity or even immortality. And so we see here an early melding of Zen Buddhism and Daoism as both traditions look to this man as a religious hero. In fact, it was the Daoists who were the first to claim that Bodhidharma had taught physical exercise. As early as the 11th century, Daoist literature attributed embryonic breathing to Bodhidharma. The Shaolin Buddhist monks, surprisingly, had credited the mythic Vajrapani as the source of their fighting systems, and it was only around the 18th century that the Buddhists adopted the Bodhidharma myth as their own. At this point, you may have noticed that there are a few elements to this whole story that might be fabricated. It's highly unlikely that Bodhidharma was a trained fighter, despite other legends that he had studied the Indian martial art of Kalaripayat. What is trustworthy, however, is that the Shaolin monastery did function as a school and repository of various disciplines of martial arts. The different martial arts styles that were taught there, however, were often developed elsewhere. There's no evidence that the Shaolin monks' early military exploits during the Tang Dynasty, the 7th to 10th century, were carried out with a style of fighting original or unique to the monastery. It is true, however, that Shaolin's system of staff fighting during the Ming Dynasty, 14th century to 17th century, was legendary and highly regarded, and likely a distinct style that did evolve there at the monastery. The unarmed combat, for which the temple would become so famous, was significantly influenced by Daoist Daoyin, which is a precursor to Qigong. Mayor Shahar, who has written the essential book on the subject, The Shaolin Monastery, argues the foundations of late imperial bare-handed styles, such as Shaolin Quan, were laid during the late Ming and the early Qing by the integration of Ming hand combat with an ancient gymnastic tradition that had largely evolved within a Daoist context. By the late 19th century, Buddhist monks at the Shaolin Temple were practicing gymnastic methods that had been recorded in Daoist scriptures, that had evolved in Daoist circles, and that had been attributed to Daoist immortals. Zen Buddhism, then, had little to do with the development of the countless schools of martial arts that were developing throughout China and even within Shaolin itself. Moreover, Shahar presents compelling evidence that no modern martial art can claim for itself a foundation at the Shaolin Temple prior to the 20th century. There's simply insufficient evidence to make such a claim. Okay, from a modern scientific point of view, the supernatural stories of Bodhidharma are easy to dismiss. Screaming ants, eyelid-flavored tea, and the rest are unlikely. In actuality, scholars today also cast serious doubt on nearly the entire story. Bodhidharma may never have even entered the Shaolin Temple. Accounts of him teaching martial arts may well be a product of the 20th century. According to Stanley Henning, it was a popular novel, first published in 1904, that started the myth. If he's right, Travels of Lao Khan by Liu E is the source for this remarkable legend. From there, quite a number of books appeared in the early decades of the 20th century, which developed the story of Bodhidharma as the founder of Shaolin martial arts. And still today, the legend continues. The whole Bodhidharma legend makes for a cool, awesome story, but it isn't true. Now, while an accurate rendering of history is extremely important, we should remember that we are talking about a religious and cultural figure. It is our Western post-Enlightenment inclination to separate fact and fiction for the sake of truth. And that's good, but it often overlooks the value of legend and myth and tradition. In the words of D.T. Suzuki, sometimes so-called facts are not so important, but what scholars call imaginations or legend, they are more important in the study of human nature. I often ask my students, is the story of the boy who cried wolf true? If we mean literal historical truth, well, who knows? But is the story true in a deeper sense? Of course. In one respect, the story is much more true because it happens every day. Or consider the Good Samaritan or the prodigal son or the rich man and Lazarus. None of those may be stories of historical literal truth, but does that mean we shouldn't teach them and share them and contemplate them? Discarding them as not true would simply be foolishness. So, martial artists, What is the truth of Bodhidharma that we should understand, remember, and, dare I say, meditate upon? There is a long history within Asian martial arts of a profound relationship between spiritual discipline and physical discipline. A strong mind and a strong character, the foundations of a strong human being, these require serious and sustained effort. Physical cultivation enables us to develop our mental and spiritual faculties. Likewise, cultivating the internal fosters greater strength to develop the external. Just as in the story with the young monks who come to Bodhidharma seeking enlightenment and are taught the physical disciplines that are the foundation of Kung Fu. So setting oneself on an odyssey of martial discipline creates the foundation for the deeper cultivation of mind and soul and character. There is a long, strange, beautiful relationship between religious pursuit and the discipline of martial arts. And it's not just in China with its warrior monks. It is the Do of Karate-Do, Judo, Kendo, Kyudo, and Taekwondo. And while the legend of Bodhidharma is not literal history, legends still have a place in our lives. So, the next time you're in your martial arts school training and you see a picture of Bodhidharma on the wall, or you think about him, let the legend inspire you to reflect on how the physical work you're putting in, the development of the body through martial arts, can be part of the path, the way, the journey to becoming a more enlightened human being. Now, if you're wondering about the problem of how we can reconcile Buddhism's teachings of nonviolence with the practice of an art form designed to kill, cripple, and maim, well, that's beyond this video. But feel free to check out this book if you're interested in that fascinating topic. Thank you.